So I guess where we are on this is that there were disclosures made, there was a process to manage those potential conflicts, and everyone was seemingly satisfied with that process.
Yes.
Okay. And yours evidence is that the conflict of interest disclosures were made to the third party and not made known to the department.
The information necessary for the department to put in place arrangements was made, obviously, known to the department, because we put in place various kind of controls and various kind of processes to make sure that we were implementing the probity plan. So the outcomes of any concerns or risks or anything raised that were turned into mitigable actions and controls. It's an iterative process. So I am certain, for example, that in some of the conflicts of interest discussions I had, an approach about probity that resulted in certain activities, and so everyone involved in the project went through that iterative process. So I'm not saying whether categorically 0 was shared or 100%. It was very much dependent on the necessary assessment, with the aim being that there was a high level of integrity maintained around this complex commercial negotiation.
Okay.
And other commercial parties, including the expression of interest process.
Yeah. So in relation to the COIs flagged by the Minister's Office, you don't know the contents of those?
Not in detail, no.
Do you, Ms Wilson?
No, and Senator, kind of any disclosures to the probity advisor, they do relate to individuals and their personal circumstances, and they do share that information on a confidential basis to facilitate the appropriate mitigations and controls. Well, individuals have to have confidence that it will be treated in confidence to allow that independent probity advisor to put in place the right mitigations and controls.
Of course, and I think everyone respects that idea, but we also take great care in protecting taxpayer funds from conflicts of interest, right?
Every action was taken in this process.
So, do you know whether the Blackbird was raised in the COIs?
Senator, as the Secretary said, Blackbird had no involvement in this process.
Okay. That's unequivocal, thank you. So, can I ask you then, what about these non-disclosure agreements? Have there been non-disclosure agreements signed?
Which non-disclosure agreements
between
are you talking about?
The government and PsiQuantum?
So we have legal documents and deeds in place about protecting the commercial information that was provided to us, both from PsiQuantum and other parties through the expression of interest process.
What's the expiry date of the NDAs?
I don't have
I'll take that on notice.
Yeah.
I don't have that.
Does the NDA start from March 23, do you know?
I have to take that on notice as well. My sense is that it really only kicked in a significant way when we were approaching them to provide us with non-public information.
Okay,
but I'm happy to take it on notice exactly when it happened.
I think your earlier evidence this morning was that the department made the legal notification back in February 24.
That's right, and we did provide that on notice to you, Senator.
And then, that's right, you did, and then the public judgment was made known in April 24.
Yeah, so there's no... So just...
And then, so what you have taken on notice is when was the Cabinet judgment?
And I'm happy to take it on notice, but obviously Cabinet deliberations aren't always revealed.
I understand that, yeah.
So I'm not... And it's a straightforward kind of... The connection between the requirement for us to notify of a significant legal matter is a very separate discussion from appropriate probity arrangements in this matter. There is no connection between those two. You heard this morning from my Chief Legal Counsel that there was nothing connecting. The reason to provide the advice to government, the centralised legal services, was around the negotiating of the contract nothing to do with probity or any concerns
I understand
on that front.
Secretary, but the point I'd make to you is if the government has signed an agreement with one organisation, a quantum computing organisation, but is separately undertaking an EOI, some people might look at the EOI and think, well, that's a sham process.
So as I said, as part of the process of moving to a stage of considering the proposal to a level that of additional scrutiny, you've heard Dr Foley talk about the phases, you've heard the lawyer Janine Richardson this morning talking about legal phases. This was done in phases as the government considered it. There was an opportunity through a market testing proposal to seek information from other participants in the system about what opportunities they had. And there was an EOI process that ran over a month. That was assessed by the same technical advisory group that assessed the PsiQuantum.
It was a slightly different
Slightly,
advisory
okay, very high overlap.
With advice from the technical advisory group.
High overlap. There was the working up of the EOI was a cross-agency effort drawing on technical
I understand
and
that. I
commercial.
think you've provided evidence.
So I do not accept the characterisation, as I said earlier.
Yep.
The EOI process was an integrated part of the assessment. It was the information provided was assessed seriously and with due diligence, and there was every opportunity, if one of those companies had provided information, that there might well have been a different outcome in this process.
Okay. So what does the NDA restrict PsiQuantum from doing?
So from a government perspective, I'd have to double check. It was more about protecting their IP from inadvertent disclosure to other entities.
It didn't seek to restrict them from telling other people, such as investors, that they were going to get this contract?
So we certainly were maintaining. We certainly had discussions around them, and I have to take that on notice. We were very conscious that they could not characterise anything with the government unfairly, and so there were discussions about how they engaged with investors.
So they're not. They just want to be expressed about this. So was one of the arrangements that they weren't to be telling investors or prospective investors that they had a contract with the Commonwealth Government?
There was no contract with the Commonwealth Government until the 31st of May 2024. And so, yes, there would have been an exclusion from them saying something that doesn't exist. We certainly had, and I'm happy to take it on notice, but we certainly had discussions with them about how they were managing their information set to other people. Because we were very conscious of the need to protect both the integrity of the government process but also the integrity of the company's process, noting that they had board considerations, we had government considerations, and other regulatory agencies were involved.
Senator Bragg, I'll just do some time management here and say that we're due to go to the dinner break at 6:35, which is in just under 20 minutes, and we plan to do that, and the committee's agreed to move to program 1.3 after the dinner break. So I do want to go to Senator Hodgins-May, who's got questions. So do you have one last question, or do you want me to come back to
so why don't you,
Senator Hodgins-May?
Thank you, Chair. Can you please explain what the timeline is for the strategic examination of R&D?
So the government announced in the budget that it was intending to undertake an examination, and it is still considering various options. But I'll hand to Dom English.
Dom English, Head of the Secretariat for the Strategic Examination of R&D. The Senator, at this point, the terms of reference for the R&D strategic examination, sorry, it's a long phrase, remains under consideration by government. We expect that the timetable that it will set will be in excess of 12 months, but that's to allow time for the considerations that need to be taken, but that's a matter still with government.
Were they originally was the panel planning to deliver an interim report by early 2025? Or?
Well, there isn't a panel at this point, so in the planning that I've been doing to think about how a panel might do its work for the government on this strategic examination, we have considered interim reports or final reports, but of course the final timetable and the need for the various steps in the process will be part of those terms of reference when they're settled.
How will the strategic examination of R&D connect and relate to the forthcoming National Health Medical Research Strategy, which has also been announced but doesn't seem to have commenced?
Senator, we are in discussion with the Department of Health to ensure that the issues and considerations that should inform our work taken from the work they've planned to do. Obviously, the strategic examination is going to consider the whole of the R&D system, so the considerations coming out of the health review will obviously inform that, but then the strategic examination will need to take that into a broader context.
And can you provide any details around why there's been this hold-up with the terms of reference and interim panel, and perhaps what details of stakeholder engagement that you've planned for that?
Senator, in terms of hold-up, that's your characterisation, not mine. The government didn't commit to a start date when the arrangement was announced. So I think, in the fullness of time, the arrangements will be settled and released through the usual processes. In terms of stakeholder engagement, however, the Secretariat that's doing a range of preparatory pieces of work to help support the panel to do as good a job as it can when it's appointed has been doing a lot of reaching out to stakeholder processes and trying to inform the way we think about the data and analytics we might do, the pieces of research we might commission. I personally have counted, I think, at least 70 engagements over the last 4 or 5 months with stakeholders from across the academic and the business research communities to try and make sure that we're fully aware of all the issues that should be taken into account. Once the panel's formed, my advice to them will obviously be shaped by those discussions and the sorts of things that the panel wants to explore for itself, but the usual course of events for a review like this would be a discussion paper, roundtables, opportunities for specific meetings with stakeholders and the like, and I can see no reason why we wouldn't do that in this process once it gets going, but clearly that's a matter for the panel once it's actually appointed.
And would it be possible to provide on notice perhaps those stakeholders that you've engaged with, the 70 or so that you referenced? That'd be great, thank you. And is it sort of similar around the timeline and details for the National Health Medical Research Strategy? Do you...
I would have to refer that to...
Yeah, that doesn't matter for them. But we are aware of all the activities going on in this space, and as Mr English has said, trying to connect it together efficiently.
Thank you. According to the government's own analysis, the Australian government's R&D expenditure in 2023 is forecast to be 0.49% of GDP. This is below the long-term average of 0.6 and is the lowest level since the beginning of the data series in 1978 to 79. What the report doesn't point out is that this alone is one of the lowest levels of R&D spending in the OECD, although it does note that our GERD as a percentage of GDP, 1.79, is well below the OECD average. Perhaps this is from the Minister. While the government acknowledges the R&D problem, and Senator Husick has talked about the challenges of increasing R&D expenditure, we're going backwards, not forwards. Minister, what are the government's forecasts for R&D expenditure over the forward estimates?
Well, I think the first point to make is that the total R&D expenditure is not just contained in the budget statement. The Commonwealth contribution across the system, as we were discussing before with Senator David Pocock, does go. CSIRO is important, but it's spread across the universities and the health sector, the CRCs. All of those elements of the Commonwealth's contribution. Then, of course, you've got the states and territories in areas like agriculture. That is a very important part of the national research and development capability. And then, of course, there's the private sector. And what we've seen, of course, in areas of R&D intensity, like the auto industry, is previous Conservative governments push large manufacturing firms offshore. That has done more damage to our research and development capability than anything else. So I just make that point to say it is that the purpose of the review is to have a strategic look at the whole R&D capability, and it will, I think, offer a bit more transparency too for not certainly the community, but also the R&D community. You know, those scientists who are engaged in that kind of work, to be able to see what the rest of the system looks like, and for the government to reach some conclusions about what the best way forward is. It means everybody's got to be part of a national effort to lift R&D, and it's not just a public sector equation.
Do you have an idea of what that would sit at the percentage level for government, not private sector? What?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the review. I don't know whether the minister's reached some conclusions about that, but I'm looking forward to seeing the review. I think that's its purpose, and that'll be a good platform for future decision making.
Thank you. That's all. Jeff.
Oh, thank you very much. Senator Bragg.
Thank you. Back to PsiQuantum. So if there were... Sorry, let me start again. Were there any breaches of the NDA?
Not that I'm aware of.
No allegations of...
Not that I'm aware of either.
Were reported to you?
Which NDAs are you
NDA
talking
with
about?
PsiQuantum and the Commonwealth Government?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
I am aware that there were some concerns around the EOI process.
Yeah, okay, we'll come to that. So, but basically, if PsiQuantum approached other firms seeking investment and said something like, we're in advanced negotiations with the government, would that breach the NDA?
It would depend on the circumstances, because we did have conversations with PsiQuantum at various stages about how they could or couldn't characterise various activities. Happy if you've got some more information, or we could take it on notice. But I'm not aware of any any concerns.
You're
that
not
have been
aware of any.
raised
Okay.
I can
raised with us
confirm there were no breaches of the NDA, Senator.
that we're aware of.
So none were raised with you, Ms Wilson?
No.
Okay, so if there was someone who did have such concerns, who would they report them to?
They certainly report them to the department.
Okay. When exactly is the computer supposed to be built by? Is it 2027?
That was the statement that the company provided at the launch, yes.
And will customers be able to use it?
Yes. The PsiQuantum has committed to providing opportunities for Australian researchers and companies to access the capability.
Okay, what happens if they don't meet this time frame?
It would depend on the reason why. Technology paths are uncertain, and we are highly aware of the technology nature of this project. And there are various kind of in terms of the obligations through the contract, there are various milestones, and both technological and engineering and financial milestones that they have put in place in terms of structuring the financial support from the Commonwealth Government. We're very alive to the need to protect taxpayers' money and to ensure appropriate kind of steps in that process, which is why we took the detailed commercial legal advice that we were talking about earlier. And so it would depend a little bit on why there were, if there were to be any delays, why there were any delays.
Yep.
Some of the activities they need to do are outside their control, such as, building works and the like.
Senator, I do meet monthly with senior people from PsiQuantum, and one of the things we do discuss is progress against technology milestones.
And in terms of the commercial terms and the payments, this is something that I think is being managed by
EFA.
Yep.
Export Finance Australia.
So do we put our questions about this to them?
If it's around the detailed technicalities of
About the convertible note and all that sort of stuff.
that is in the contract with EFA, yeah.
So that goes to EFA. So then what about the EOI? Can I ask you something about that?
Yes, you can.
So how many organisations submitted?
21 companies were invited to respond to the EOI. Actually, don't have.
I have the number.
Check the number who actually submitted.
21, is it?
21 were invited. Just checking facts on how many. Just want to.
And while you're doing that, I mean, what was the main feedback you received from the Australian industry about this process? Did you receive any constructive feedback about the quality of this process? Timetable, anything else?
So the
Transparency, anything like that?
So some companies were uncomfortable at the requirement for confidentiality around the process. They asked questions about why that was the case. We explained that it was important to protect all the companies involved in the process.
Yeah.
Some have subsequently asked why it wasn't longer than 4 weeks. We took advice from technical experts and others on how long we thought people would need to provide the level of information that we were being asked, noting that we weren't asking for documents or information that would require them longer than that to provide, because, as I said before, if the initial information provided by the EOI had suggested something, that the government could well have made a different determination on the path forward, because it was an open discussion within government at that point. And so it wasn't the case that if there had have been a different assessment on the EOI, we would have been on a different path going forward, which likely would have required more due diligence and details for other companies. So I have heard a characterisation that it was unfair because there had been discussions before with a company and the EOI process wasn't as deep in due diligence.
Okay.
That in itself is a characterisation that doesn't nest the EOI requirement. If people had have hit and met certain capabilities, then there would have been a second or third phase with those companies as well.
And, Senator, it's probably worth noting the list of companies, the 21 companies that were invited to participate, that list was prepared on the advice of the Technical Advisory Group, and I can let you know that 6 responded to the EOI and 5 made a submission.
6 responded and 5 submitted. Okay. Okay, and so at the announcement, which was when?
In
Sometime after April, sometime in April.
April, yeah.
It was the 30th of April.
Yeah. So it was promised that it would be built by 26, 27. Is that right?
I have 27 in my recollection.
It's 27.
Okay. And what exactly will be built by 27?
The world's first fault-tolerant quantum computer.
Okay. And where will that be?
Brisbane.
Okay. And how many, is it qubits?
That's where I'm going to turn to the lovely
How many
Dr.
qubits
Cathy
will it
Ford.
have by 2027?
So
Qubits?
I don't
Qubits?
qubits.
Qubits.
Qubits as opposed to bits.
How many will it
Quantum
have?
bits.
As you can see, I'm an expert in this matter.
I don't have that information at hand.
Can you take it on notice?
We can take it on notice.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
I've got it.
And just finally, so I just want to come back to you, Secretary. So you're taking on notice, just for the record, the question I had before about the conflict of interest disclosures made by the Minister's staff.
Are you asking specifically about Minister's staff, or are you asking about
Well, I'm
all
asking
staff?
for all of them, to the extent you can provide them.
As I said, I'm happy to take it on notice, but it's highly unlikely that personal information that's covered by the Privacy Act will be provided. But I'm happy to take it on notice.
And you're not aware of the substance of those declarations?
No, so it could, but usually, as we know the nature of them, which is to do with financial holdings and personal relationships.
Okay, well, we look forward to seeing those answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Bragg. Thank you very much to